So there's 26,000 plus members on this forum, and they're quite obsessed with the ranch. You can kind of see them as your outsider insiders because you've got your insiders group that you guys really take care of, and then there's this huge audience on Reddit. Reddit's one of the top 5 websites on the internet, where we just sort of obsess over the ranch. We get a lot of activity and a lot of people joining when the next season starts, which we're in right now. So there's a lot of discussion. And so as the friendly moderators, we have to deal with all the babysitting.
Oh my.
And all that.
I don't envy you that task.
It's a daily challenge. It's a love.
How did you get nominated for this dubious honor?
Well, I'll let Charles explain that because he actually started and he invited me, but we have 2 rules real quick that we wanted to talk about that we have on the forum that makes it very unique. First of all, there's no name calling, no insults, none of that.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yes.
Well, that's hard for us to enforce, but we do actually do that. So no one's talking, smack about you guys in a rude or anything like that.
I don't mind. I don't mind. In fact, I'll just interrupt for a second. One of the things that I'm trying to practice here, although I'm blissfully ignorant of most of the discourse out there, but, I try to take, if there is any criticism, or if there's any, what you call smack, part of my job is to deal with that gracefully because like you, I have been a very vocal advocate of elevating the discourse. And I don't just mean in terms of civility, but in terms of content. And I fully expect people to come into our work with a healthy skepticism, to put it nicely.
Yeah. And we
get healthy skepticism is great, but we're trying to limit the pseudo skepticism. The people who are pretending they're skeptics, but they're deniers. Yeah. They're not really open to, evidence or data.
Yes.
Yeah, right. they're just as dogmatic and crazy as the zealot believers.
Yes. There's quite a bit of that. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, we see a lot of that. So the second rule is, if you make claims, people are going to ask you to provide evidence for those claims. And don't get upset, and don't be surprised if your refusal to do that gets you removed from the forum. So those 2 rules really elevate us to a different level.
That is really neat. I need to think through that. Yeah, how has that worked for you guys so far?
Well, Charles set this up, and it basically requires moderation 24/7 in one form or another. So he takes the day, I take the night, kind of a thing.
Right.
So it's not easy to do that, but there's no other place on the internet like it because of that. So we're coming, and a lot of these people that post are super, super intelligent people, and it's just begging for some kind of a partnership or get them into the insiders group or something.
Sure.
Where you're crowdsourcing. Basically, these people would be willing to do crazy.
There is in fact a crowdsourcing aspect, and we can talk. I hope we get a chance to talk about that during the balance of our conversation.
Okay, great. So that's us basically.
And
wonderful.
So the way I got started in this, it was very random. I went to the subreddit as a user and tried to make a post on it, and I was unable to. The whole subreddit had been locked down. What happened was the subreddit had turned into kind of a pseudo-skeptic hellhole, and the previous moderator just resigned. He locked the subreddit and walked away. And so I asked Reddit, I was like, this subreddit's got a ton of people in it, and there doesn't appear to be any active moderation. There were 2 other people listed as moderators, but they hadn't been active in one of them in over a year. And without any questions or any further ado, they just made me a moderator. And so then I was like, all right, how do I clean this place up? How do I get it, to be productive and the kind of place where the fans are going to enjoy coming and having a discussion about this? I'm also a moderator on the Experiencers subreddit.
Interesting.
We could talk about that a little bit later. And so I've got some familiarity with trying to, how do we foster a discussion amidst all of these difficult topics? And so I just tried to, cater the rules a little bit differently. And, it's worked pretty well so far. Like as Dean said, we have to stay on top of it. And sometimes, things slip by, we tweak the rules, things like that, make sure.
Okay.
We previously said no ad hominem attacks. People didn't really seem to get what that meant. So we revised that to just like no character assassination. And as Dean said, you got to source your claims. So if you make a claim, you can't present opinion as fact, is what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
And it's working pretty well.
Yeah. So I am really, I've been really impressed with those with whom I'm familiar who have engaged in the other venue, of course, the Insider program, who have, on their own initiative and, of course, volition, stepped into either behaving as moderators or actually becoming a moderator, as well as the teaching that goes back and forth. Very good, for the most part, very good humored engagement, people helping each other, helping them to become familiar both with the website as well as with some of the incumbent narrative and some of the things that I've shared. You could call them like mini tutorials, I suppose, primers. That's really special to me. I like to see people engaging that way. Now, I know that a lot of stuff has probably happened off my radar that is not as pleasant, but my at least when I'm there, I guess everyone's on good behavior.
Yeah. You do a great job.
When you're, yeah.
Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I'm also an insider, and I've been on there, and people are definitely excited when you're engaged and active. You're so busy, though.
Yeah, and I'm really conscientious about finding the right balance there, as far as how much of that interaction, is there a point of diminishing returns where I should say, okay, well, we're good. So typically my cadence is to come in, I want to say every week or two, I will come in and either engage at length on a particular topic that I see being raised by perhaps some of the new people. Or I'll just do on the Discord side of things. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just turn the mic on, and while I'm doing other work, which is pretty much always, I just leave it open. And if people would direct a question to me, I try to speak to it. And obviously we do get into, secondary and tertiary topics, but I think they've all been really constructive so far.
You do a great job of that. I'll tell you.
That's very kind of you to say.
It's a lot of fun. My favorite thing about being an insider is actually the community, that you can actually meet other people, like-minded people who sort of understand the phenomenon and definitely understand Skinwalker Ranch, and you can actually meet with them.
Yeah.
You're not isolated to just watching the show or reading the books yourself. And,
yeah,
we're trying to do the same thing with this, the YouTube channel. We want people to comment below so that they can actually connect with other people that are like-minded people.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have done a phenomenal. I think, Brandon, you said you've got around 8,000 people in the Insiders group now.
I think about 8,500, give or take, if I'm not mistaken, and growing.
That's great.
We see all of these people as collaborators. We see the Insider program truly as an opportunity, a platform to engage the public, and also to invite input, to invite feedback and collaboration. I have to give great credit to those who are involved that have been diligently watching the 24-hour camera feeds and logging events of potential interest that we should be paying careful attention to. I mean, there are a number of very interesting events that have occurred that, if not for our insiders watching vigilantly, we would have missed. I think we would have passed over. Am I right, Erik?
You're absolutely right. Every time you make the statement like the ones you just made, Brandon, it just, it warms my heart. I really like the outlook that we do have an extended network of collaborators, engaged to varying degrees. And I say it warms my heart because it really is the fulfillment of at least aspects of a vision that Brandon and I discussed as early as 2017, certainly in 2018, about trying to find a way to get additional vigilant human eyes and ears and minds on the problem set. And so, we have, in fact, had brought to our attention many events that are, I'll just say, in certain categories, like maybe something luminous, or maybe there's some unusual sound, or there's some kind of even an instrumentation glitch some sort of an artifact, which, all of that is in scope. And so, and I should also say, that a lot of our insiders have gone and mined other resources, meaning perhaps published papers or, things that might be happening in current events, things related to all the themes and memes of, UFOs, UAPs, cryptids, portals, orbs, all the named phenomenology. People are bringing that kind of thing to my attention. I'm learning as a result of my interaction. And I joke with people, by contrast, I'm sort of an outlier in the sense that I'm determined to be caught red-handed in the act of learning. And I certainly have with our insiders.
That's great. So what's your long-term vision? There's this whole big hoopla right now. Brandon, you're aware of this. People are crying for raw data, right? And I know there's some controversy around how you want to release that, who you want to have see it, because there's a lot of, let's call them naysayers for now, that would maybe actually, manipulate the data. You can't really trust them necessarily with raw data.
Yeah.
What's your long-term vision? Is the next step going to be making the raw data available to people in the insiders group?
Well, to what point is it useful? I mean, when people ask for raw data, I don't even think they realize what they're asking for. I think there's a level of ignorance and arrogance associated with a lot of those requests, because they don't even know what they're asking for. If they're asking for raw data relative to the investigation, they're asking for countless terabytes of surveillance footage drawn from 50 cameras, along with a host of other platforms, infrasonic sensors, a host of spectrum analyzers, so many instruments that are all reporting in via the platforms that Erik Bard, as principal investigator, has structured for purposes of the investigation. And again, I'm not. It isn't that we want collaboration. We would love to crowdsource the data, just like we're crowdsourcing the live video feed for purposes, which, by the way, is audio as well. I mean, we're inviting people to data log, video, audio events, or any other useful observations, even observations that come through, the avionics receiving platforms that aren't just exclusive to what we have on the ranch. I mean, people have access to that data. They're public domain resources to a large degree, and we invite that level of collaboration because we want to separate the signal from the noise. We want to be able to separate that which is mundane or may have a natural prosaic explanation from that which rises to the level of being truly interesting or potentially unexplained or unusual. And I think the cry for data or raw data, I think the thing that frustrates us at times is we still have yet to repeat a number of critical experiments and research studies in order to have a complete data set. You don't just start circulating incomplete data or research for peer review without, I think, having a body of work and evidence and data that you can draw meaningful conclusions from. Erik, do you have anything else to add to that?
I'm processing what you said, and it's right out of our conversations. I mean, even as recently as within the last 24 hours, you and I have connected and we've talked about, how to take that thrust forward in terms of putting data out there. And there was a point made earlier in the question itself about avoiding the contamination of the data. That was one of my I really like that. In fact, I'd like you to expound on that a little bit and make sure that I'm understanding it the way you mean it, because I think you have the same thing in mind, but I want to be sure.
Well, I'm specifically talking about Mick West on Twitter, where he specifically asked for just the raw data of, I think it was the bottles that you threw out of the helicopter.
Okay. Yes.
He just wanted that data. And the problem with that I saw was you give him the data and it could be manipulated because it's just such a small little data set, right? I mean, how many did you actually get? It doesn't really tell the whole story. They want this little piece. They want one photograph here. Show me a video. How do you prove something like the 1.6 gigahertz signal? I mean, you've got data going back years. Have you got that filed in one can you go to a file folder or a database and pull up everything you know on 1.6 gigahertz and orb? And I mean, is that how you're storing this data, or is it really just stored as images here and files here? Do you have it? Does that make sense? And he wants just that one piece to prove his point. And that's not a really trustworthy position to.
I think I follow. I appreciate you answering my question. A lot of times I think that the request/protest is perhaps misinformed. And what I would love to do with those who are maybe not militantly so, but who are maybe a little critical, maybe a little anxious about getting their hands on data, I'd love to just ground them in what the data actually are and what the tools and methods are for collecting them. And also, I think what we would end up smoking out in the course of that conversation is what really are the concerns, and what might be some of even the worthy challenges that we would gladly engage with. It's just that based on some of the names that we might mention, or based on what has been said about comments coming from some of these sources, it sounds like there's a really, really strong sort of anti-confirmation bias, if you will.
Right.
What would we call that? A disbelief bias. and I don't really want to engage with that on its terms. I want to engage on, in a time, place, and manner of my choosing, or really, I should say, of Brandon's choosing. So, yeah. But again, I think the right thing to do with those who are perhaps clamoring for data is to first walk them through that discussion. What are the data? What are the tools? What are the methods? And then to go into any topics that may actually have motivated the question, because it's usually not just, hey, I want data. Usually there's something behind that.
Right. But it's fair to say that.
Have I answered the question well enough? I want to make sure I'm not.
No. I think you've been crystal clear on that. But it's fair to say in a summary, though, that when the data does come out, it's probably going to flow to the insiders group first, right?
Fair enough. Yeah,
Rather than you do some peer-reviewed thing with scientists outside, you want to first get that data out to the insiders, get some crowdsourcing going there, and then go from there. That makes a lot of sense.
I almost feel like, Brandon and I talk about the possibility of maybe doing a very both high level and deep diving summary of this work since its inception, going back to 2016.
Oh, yeah.
And really, I think, gosh, if we just had that tome in our hands right now, and if people could read that, meaning to read our experience almost in journal form, I think a lot of people would find out that when they're trying to do that, if you will, us and them analysis, I think they'll figure out that we're part of the us and not the them. And that, we are, I would say, spectacularly open with the data we're collecting. As Brandon mentioned, the live stream being a great example. You've got video there. Can you imagine trying to see what's happening on Skinwalker Ranch back in the 90s and 2000s?
Right.
That wasn't going to happen.
Well, even from 2010 to 2020, in any other era, and for that matter, let me interject. Show me another research effort that provides such an engaged 24-hour live stream and interactive forum for discussing and evaluating these topics and really the events associated with these topics that we are collating, that we are trying to properly organize and then analyze in order to better understand the nature of what is happening at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, you've come up with something that is insanely unique. I mean,
I love it. I love hearing that.
No, it's true. There's nothing else like it on the planet, right? I mean, I think on Google Maps, Skinwalker Ranch is looked up more than any other location, something like that, right? There was
number one. It was official last year in 2022. Skinwalker Ranch was the most searched landmark in the United States, according to Google and Travel and Leisure, who actually double-checked the data and confirmed it.
Right. And I think that speaks volumes to what you guys are doing. It's the most famous, one of the most famous locations on the planet right now. You guys are driving that. and it's science-based, and you're letting the public see it. They have to pay $10 a month. I think that insider's $10 a month it's a no-brainer. Anyone that's really interested in this phenomenon, I'm glad it's so cheap, and I'm glad that you guys have put that together, so that people can really get even closer to you than just the TV show. Because let's face it, the TV show doesn't really show the whole picture, right?
They can't.
It can't. And you guys are very different than what's on the show in some cases, radically different.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, I guess there's some truth to what you said. I wouldn't dwell too much on the differences. I would say, though, that to the point you made earlier about how much we can really put into the documentary episodes. It's just a logistical challenge like nothing else. I have to say, I really don't envy the guys whose job it is to take those countless hours of footage and turn it into a coherent narrative. Just think about the faith, if you will, required on the part of our documentary partners. We're talking about Prometheus Entertainment. They come out here fully understanding that when they arrive on the ranch, whatever resources they're committing to participate in the investigation, there are no guarantees that anything is going to happen. Anything that goes down the line of the incumbent narrative, the phenomenology, we never know what's going to happen. There are no buttons to push, no levers to pull. We have some ideas, we have some testable hypotheses. A lot of times I kind of draw a distinction between what we are actually doing and what you might term an actual experiment. Sometimes I use the term exercise because I acknowledge that we don't have even a hope of the kinds of controls that we might enjoy in a clean room environment or some other laboratory environment. So just to kind of button that up, when I think about Prometheus coming out here to work with us, to do some things that are really sometimes very, very visionary and very visually spectacular, to get those 42 minutes or whatever it is per episode, they're shooting for a week, and I think we did a back of the envelope calculation, and we said that the yield was something like 0.87%, less than 1% of the material that is shot ends up actually in the final cut. So there are going to be gaps. There are going to be what will be for some disconnects. And that's where the Insider program hopefully helps to sort of fill in some of those gaps.
And to close the loop on that topic, when I met with the late Kevin Burns, who was the president of Prometheus Entertainment, who flew into Salt Lake City to meet with us to persuade us to consider allowing them to engage and to have a docu-series effort regarding Skinwalker Ranch and our investigation. I told Kevin in that first meeting, I said, look, I went 6 months personally without seeing anything with my own eyes that was unusual, or feeling or witnessing anything unusual or anything that would rise to the level of being intriguing relative to the ranch. And if you think that you're going to come out and drop 24 professionals from Los Angeles onto the property for a period of months to follow the team and document their research and their efforts, and you think that it's going to happen and you're going to capture phenomena and events predictably, then you're wrong. We are not in control. We are not in control. And it is completely unpredictable. We use the term transient.
Right.
We discuss the electromagnetic anomalies. It's the radioactive, the gamma and microwave energy bursts. I mean, just as those are transient and unpredictable, I mean, the activity comes and goes, and it appears things happen when you least expect it, notwithstanding, using rockets and other dramatic mechanisms in order to try to stimulate, something in the space. We don't know, from one day to the next, what is really going to help us better understand and document the reality of what we see there. And so, again, not to be verbose, but following up on what Erik was saying, there is no, they do have faith. There is no guarantee. And my deal with the History Channel from day one contractually has been that nothing can be faked or manipulated or contrived, and they have to work with our team. Travis Taylor was the one exception that I approved and agreed to, and they suggested bringing in an outside scientist to consult with the team and help ask questions and drive the investigation. We reluctantly agreed to take the meeting with Travis, and the rest is history. And we have a team dynamic and an effort that continues to this day. Anyhow, proceed with your next question, Dean. Charles,
what do you got?
Let me chime in. I know you guys just kind of buttoned that up, but I want to unbutton it again a little bit.
Go ahead.
Bring it on.
So you mentioned the transients like being a problem, but in some ways it seems kind of like the transients is a lot of the phenomenon itself that you're dealing with out there, is the fact that these things aren't easily repeatable. It behaves in a completely unpredictable manner. And it makes it very, very difficult, as you said, for the production company to get continuous stuff to put into the show. With a lot of the people on the subreddit, they don't realize that Skinwalker Ranch is more than the TV show. Like we have to keep telling people, there's a whole history here. There's books that have been written. There's, if you join the insiders, you get all of these interviews with the cast and the crew. And
and there's over 8 months of investigation that is not covered by the docuseries that is ongoing. Erik, have you taken a month off in the last? Have you had a week or two in the last several years where you have not been there in the command center?
No.
So, Erik, can we stop here for a second? I wanted to talk about this. People talk about this on the forum, on the Reddit forum. It's your health. You're always online. Everyone sees you all the time. The insiders are always, you know what I'm saying? That we're worried about you. Are you going to burn out at some point? Are you concerned about burning out? Serious. How many hours do you work a day? You have a life?
Let's just say I'm very strongly motivated.
But are you concerned at all about burning out? At some point you hit a wall where you can't get out of bed in the morning because you're just so exhausted.
Look, candles were made to burn. What do you want me to say? I joke with people, and look, this is how I have approached a lot of my career engagements. In fact, pretty much all of them. You could ask my wife; she could vouch for this.
You're married?
Yes.
Do you ever see your wife?
Probably shouldn't say too much at this point about this, but I've had to, in my career engagements, sometimes work in solitude, whether it's in a laboratory or in a machine shop or out here on the ranch. This has become somewhat normal for me. I joke with people and I say, look, I don't burn the candle at both ends. I throw the whole candle into the bonfire. and the real question, I suppose, is whether our objectives, our ambitions here warrant that type of engagement. To back up a little in our conversation, I think it's I appreciate what sounds at least like praise. I think it's a little hyperbolic. It's a little hyperbole to say that I'm always on. I've heard that before from other sources. The truth is, I am present on the ranch, obviously very much so in the recent 2 years. Present on the ranch to be a live in-person human observer. Mm-hmm. But also, I have the instrumented vigil now with the company of our insiders. There was a time, I would say, going back, to say 2018 and previously, I imagined that this work could be done entirely remotely. I could administer everything remotely, and I set up the assets for that purpose. And very often, I'd be in my, in a remote location, connecting with the ranch and controlling certain things or simply monitoring certain things, and it was really intriguing. There were real results coming out of that. At least I was getting records that raised the question as to whether what I was seeing is of the same classification as the things reported to us. Going back a bit to our discussion about the outcry for data, Brandon, I'll put you on the spot, and if you don't want to answer this, don't. But I think I know the answer, and that is this: you've got Brandon, who is more than heavily invested. Obviously, he bought the property, bought
the property and invested significant sums before there was any discussion of a docuseries effort with History Channel.
Right.
Yeah.
We never intended to take this public, to be clear, for the first several years. And as we have dove in head first and frankly invested not only the money needed in order to pull together the right type of systems to document and monitor what is happening at the ranch, but also the time. The element of time is the greatest investment of all. I think, to draw a pop culture analogy into this, I don't know if any of you've seen the movie Gattaca. Dean Charles, Eric and I talk about this quite often, but in Gattaca, at the very end, there's a key pivotal moment in the movie where the principal character says he never saved anything for the swim back. And I think it's safe to say that Erik and I, myself as steward, Erik as principal investigator, there was a time several years ago where we made the decision to truly dive into this and not save anything for the swim back. And a big part of sustaining an effort like this and doing so with integrity is being transparent and collaborative.
Right.
I really like that reference. Gosh, I remember the first time, I think it came to both of us simultaneously. We were sitting at dinner, and there was this moment where we were both thinking about exactly that quote, because it seemed so apropos, Brandon.
Yeah.
Saving nothing for the swim back. And I think there's that continues to be the way that I've engaged, and that I'm engaging now. Now, here's the part where I put you on the spot.
Okay.
How many times, as someone who is as invested as anyone could be, how many times did you ask for data from the incumbent sources?
Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question.
So, when you, to put it more in more straightforward language, you bought the property from Mr. Bigelow, and I recall you rehearsing for me some of the exchanges.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a little bit. It's been a lot. We're both living on next to no sleep. Erik and I were on the phone reviewing a number of critical items at 3 a.m.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
And so we're living on no sleep or very little sleep, typically, just with the constant vigil, not just with the ranch, but all of the other interests that play into it. Erik, I totally understand what you're asking. How often did I ask for data and receive data from Mr. Bigelow and participants that were involved with that investigation that spanned decades? And I would say never. I mean, at the end of the day, we received a little bit of feedback, a little bit of historical reference material that was
very high level.
It was very high level. It was not data. It was more anecdotal in nature and kind of a very high level overview. But I was never privy to any data. In fact, I acquired the ranch with the express understanding that I would receive no data or material, that I was buying it as is. And I, as much as that frustrated me to a degree, because it would have been nice. On the other hand, I thought, well, I'd never seen a UFO or a ghost, an orb, and I happen to believe that there was a natural explanation, most likely, for what had happened. I was more inclined to believe that what had been reported for decades was nothing more than an adult scientific snipe hunt and the product of groupthink. And so I wasn't really afraid. I was like, well, if you're not going to turn data, if you're not going to turn data over, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because I'm going to develop my own data set that is either going to prove or demonstrate that there is nothing noteworthy here, or that there maybe is something of interest. And that's how I engaged. That's how I purchased the property. The first monitoring equipment that was established, even the first early security systems and platforms that we put in place, were largely focused on observational science and an observational effort to better understand the environment and what was happening within that environment, and document whether there were truly interesting phenomena or events. But how's that for an answer, Eric?
I wasn't sure whether it was a sensitive topic or
no,
something.
I wasn't following. It's just I've got to go crack open another Diet Mountain Dew. But
well, hey, look,
yeah. So imagine I'm buying the ranch.
There we go.
I'm Brandon Fugal. I'm chairman of Colliers International, and previously it was Coldwell Banker Commercial. I own 30 offices across the country in 11 states. I have a lot of interests, and I'm meeting Mr. Bigelow as a peer, and respect Mr. Bigelow. I truly do. And I still have great regard for the foundation that he laid, leading to investigation of a lot of these topics, not just at Skinwalker Ranch and beyond. But imagine, in my position of paying significant sum of money for the ranch, and committing to be a steward, that I'm going to hopefully take that forward, and not receiving any data, and me not having the level of entitlement or pounding my fist on the table. You can only imagine how I view the Twitter mob, who continually feels entitled to that which they don't even understand that they're asking for. They don't even understand what it means to get raw data.
Right.
Eric and I know raw data, and reviewing and analyzing raw data, say goodbye to the next 100 hours of your life if you're going to even do your due diligence. And I feel like it's ignorance, and it's a lot more involved than Mick West, analyzing. And this is not disrespectful toward Mick West, but I'm using it as an example. Mick West requesting the data from the bottle drop experiments, while a seemingly simple, straightforward request. Well, you have to have the proper context, and you have to have a complete data set and all of the other reporting mechanisms in order to, I think, properly assess the very data that you're asking for. Am I right, Eric? Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that's a fair statement. I've lined out, for those who are interested in a respectful dialogue. I've lined out the process. I've described the instruments that were used. I've described the steps in terms of the post-processing. You have an instrument, it's logging internally, in this case, a GPS position that's stored on a micro SD card. You bring it in. I've got some code that I've written to go and parse the resulting files, portions of which are actually the data that we're looking for. These are what we call GPS sentences, or I'll just leave it at that. And then another piece of code ingests the resulting file into a model not unlike the one you see behind me, to give us some sort of a sense of what happened when we were, say, flying in a Cessna, or in the helicopter or launching a rocket or something of that nature.
So, Erik, how many bottles did you actually retrieve at the end? I think you only showed one or two in the episode. How many total did you get?
So it would be important to understand that we had bottles of different kinds in that experiment. We had some that we would call them witnesses or dummies, just so that we could watch the trajectories. Those were, of course, the majority. We had some that were equipped with cameras, those small cube cameras, and they could observe if there was anything that would show up in the visible or near infrared, I suppose. We'd get that record. And then there were 4 bottles that were deployed with the GPS sensors. I believe in the exercise that we're talking about with the helicopter, if memory serves. We did not retrieve all of them.
Okay, yeah, because some of the neighbors, I heard from some of the neighbors there that said they retrieved some bottles and they were empty.
Correct.
And sort of insinuating that you guys were just throwing empty bottles and this is all made up.
Oh,
I wanted to check that with you. So you confirmed that you did drop some
of that angle.
You dropped some that were empty. You admit
correct.
that.
Well,
okay.
they weren't strictly empty. They were made. They were weighted in such a way as to perfectly match the others. We wanted them all to have the same mass. You probably recall that the bottles were released. They had different colors. They were yellow and they were sort of an orange color bottle.
Yeah, and the different ribbon, right?
Yes, and the ribbon provided a certain amount of drag and orientation as the bottle would fall, so it wasn't just tumbling. And so we went to lengths to make sure that they were all the same mass. And yes, some of them had as a purpose to serve as witnesses. Again, just following them down with our cameras is also useful. And so it's interesting. I never thought about that question being raised because some of the bottles were not instrumented.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things is, it's mine.
Go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you, Charles. Go ahead. You're doing good.
Okay. That's one of the things is that, we see a lot of the allegations on the subreddit and, misunderstandings, and we want to get to the bottom of those and kind of ask you about those.
Oh, I love that. I actually
want to back
welcome
up.
it.
Well, good. Again, we're gonna.
This is a great example of what was for me an unanticipated concern.
Well, we got a lot of those. We got a lot of.
I think that people who have concerns of this nature may not be familiar with, I guess, a lot of how science is done. I don't want to be disparaging at all. I don't want to be condescending or pejorative. I just want to say that in my work in product development, in different industries, there's a subset of what you deploy or what you test that may be, the full model, if you will, and then there are always witness samples. And in this case, that's what if you will, the dummies were all about.
Because people were saying, of course, it's just for the show. Like, they say it all the time, it's just for the show. I
wouldn't be here if it was just for the show.
Everything you guys say, I come up with like 5 or 10 more questions, but I want to go back to this. So one of the things that did come out of Bigelow's research via Colm Kelleher was a discussion of the hitchhiker phenomenon. And that is something that is not touched on in the show. But, I've listened to those Chips and Salsa, the insider Q&As, and I'm not saying that this is anything with the hitchhiker, but some of the most interesting stuff that happens doesn't make it into the show. Some of the really kind of weird stuff. Now, you're also talking about your health, for example. That's a concern. Like, people are like, are these guys getting like the infamous hitchhiker? Like, is the crew getting the hitchhiker? Like, there's talk that some of the insiders watching the cameras potentially have experienced things.
I've had that brought to my
attention. Are you willing to talk about that at all? I know it's
absolutely
more on the woo side, but
so we would love to talk about it. We'd love to answer any question you have.
Great, because both of us have done deep dives on the subreddit about this, so we know a lot of the background on it. First of all, Brandon,
can we take a moment? I think this is implicit, but I really think it's worth, bringing to the surface why this is such a compelling topic. Why is there so much interest in this? I think I know why.
Why do you think?
I think there is a obviously, the term hit home. I mean, the idea of the what has been termed the hitchhiker phenomenon or effect, following people home. That's chilling. If in fact that's what's going on, if you're coming into this topic and you don't know about that, the idea that somehow either being physically present or otherwise engaged with this property could somehow cause some unusual, very unlikely things to happen in your own environment, wherever you are. So this is very suggestive of a non-local effect, something that is able to reach out and in certain cases interfere with people's lives at great distance. So I think it's just so profound and quite frankly spooky.
We need to talk about that word spooky, because there does seem to be.
I may not be using it in the right way here.
But no. I've got a couple of questions for Brandon real quick about it, but I want to make sure we get back to this whole superstition aspect to it, because it seems like there's an idea that if you talk about it, it makes it worse. So people don't end up talking about it in potentially scientific context.
Isn't that interesting?
Does that make sense? And I want to get back to that, but
that's actually part of the Native American tradition. That probably.
And it also the Mormon background that some of you guys have, right? Okay. If you talk about the adversary, it invites them into your house, right? So I want to talk about that. But first of all, Brandon, why won't the History Channel let you talk about the hitchhiker effect on the show at all? It's like banned.
They've steered away from some of the dialogue and some of the interaction that has touched on these topics, because I think the History Channel, believe it or not, even though they are the producer of Ancient Aliens and The Unexplained, with regard to The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, they truly want to stay grounded in scientific methodology. They want to avoid anything that would be considered woo. It's just something. I mean, well, I'll tell you, when we first engaged with history, the senior executives there, I based on my interaction with them, they did not believe that there was validity to the claims. They didn't really care. They were just, they were funding a docuseries, associated with an interesting piece of property in northeastern Utah. I don't think they believed that there was going to be anything of substance that would come out of it other than an interesting, set of potentially recreations and anecdotal accounts. And I think they were pleasantly surprised with the way that we have gone about this. But I think, there is a tendency to try to avoid that which is very hard to categorize, to be grounded in. And they try to avoid anything that you can't really support or that you don't have data. And it's not that we don't have data relative to the hitchhiker effect. I mean, because I believe we do have a data set.
Yeah.
Ever expanding and growing relative to the phenomenology associated with that specific aspect of the ranch phenomena. But that isn't to say that we aren't going to be addressing it in the months ahead, that it isn't going to come forward. I think they felt like there were higher priority items, as Erik mentioned accurately. A very small percentage, minute percentage of that which is documented and recorded for 4 months of the year,
right,
ends up on the screen. And I think there is a level of trying to prioritize. There's a level of prioritization when it comes to what is worthy of being presented on the docuseries and what merits consideration, and that which maybe is set aside. There is a lot that may be brought back. There is a lot that we may introduce in the future that has yet to be presented for whatever reason, whether it be that we want to go back and revisit certain topics, run additional experiments before revisiting things, or it could be that we feel like it hasn't risen to the level where it it's higher priority than some of the other things. I'm sorry.
No, that sort of explains it. Regardless of the reason, I thought it was interesting because they do a lot of show things on their programs that scare people, right? So it's not the scary aspect of the hitchhiker effect that's keeping them away. It's sort of how it's sort of unfounded. It's hard to prove, right?
Well, and this is a docuseries. This is not a clip show. This is not I don't know. It's not a paranormal show.
Right. Where you're showing cryptids and ghost stories.
Where a husband and wife and the oldest daughter are being played by actors that are doing historical reenactments.
Right.
They're trying to recreate it with special effects. And this is a very detailed, factual documentary account of an ongoing research investigation at Skinwalker Ranch. And even though there are times, and you'll notice it's not that often, there are times when it is appropriate to have a reenactment to help people that are following to properly visualize or at least contextualize what is happening and really the why behind some of our questions of the investigation or the historical context. We try to stay away from that. I mean, this is focused, I think it's fair to say it's focused 95 to 99% of the time on the actual work and interaction of the teammates, the team members, and an army of credentialed third-party professionals that are brought on board as appropriate to assist.
Right. It's just on the show we don't see anything about the hitchhiker effect. It's not mentioned, but it still it's still not yet. Okay, fair enough. It still seems central to your actual investigation because these are real things that happen to people. It's got a social contagion aspect to it. In fact, it's probably a good thing it's not on the History Channel because we've received messages from people who've done deep dives on the ranch, like they binge watched it, and then they feel like the next day or that night something happens right in their homes. Electronics are disrupted, dark shadow figures, objects thrown across, right. And you guys have heard that too. We've heard it from reading books, looking at the live feed.
I receive letters. I receive emails.
There you go.
Daily from people claiming that after watching the show, after watching the program or studying this topic, that things start happening that mirror or at least seem to be related.
Yeah. Erik, what do you think the mechanism is for that? Is it, or Charles, I'll ask you, what is it, because it's now sort of in their mind, so it sort of opens up their reality to the possibility, because they don't physically go to the ranch. Charles, how do you think that works?
I'm going to pass this back for the moment. I had to swap microphones, so hopefully my level's okay. I'd like to hear Erik chime in on this, but I'm also curious, we've talked about viewers. Has anybody on the ranch, cast or crew, experienced things that you guys could talk about that you think might be related to that? Or is that not ready?
No, we can share that right now. I mean, Erik, I don't want to, I don't want to talk over you. I want you to contribute, but my wife, who before we were married, I'm on my second marriage and remarried less than 2 years ago. But my fiance at the time, when she first visited the ranch and returned home that night, that evening, had a number of things occur that were witnessed by others. There were witnesses to certain events that occurred, and it was quite quite unsettling. I have not experienced the so-called hitchhiker effect, but I'm just mentioning someone who is very close to me. We've had countless members of crew, extended consultants, and even some of our own team members that have experienced this. Erik, I'll let you weigh in.
Well, I will not dodge the question. I'll give an affirmative answer. Yes, things have happened in my space off of the ranch that are in that class that I have called unlikely, unusual, hard to explain.
Yeah.
I've shared. There's one that I feel comfortable sharing, but before I say much more, I'll just say this: I don't have permission at home to go into great detail about this. And
is there a fear that it's going to make it worse? Because I think this is the core of the issue. Is why are we so afraid to talk about it if it's just another phenomenon? It scares the shit out of people, but
I just don't. I don't. It isn't universally, or certainly isn't to be taken for granted that it's a winning move for someone in my position to address this with a lot of enthusiasm and perhaps risk the perception that I'm a victim of confirmation bias or anything like that. Without knowing my past and my outlook on these topics prior to my engagement with the ranch, I don't think anyone has a fair chance of really knowing what my mindset is relative to these things. If anything, I would say that I came into the work with an anti-confirmation bias, to put it nicely. So I'll share. Do you want a story, or do you just want the category answer?
No, we want to hear a story specifically. Yeah. How deep does it get? And also, I'm curious if you're afraid to tell this. How are you going to tell this story? Are you going to tell it in a way that it's bothering, it's disturbing, it scares you?
No. I think the right way to do this,
as a scientist,
is to be very pragmatic about it to the extent. Yeah. So, and I'll preface this with something that Brandon and I have said to each other. I think I started it many times. I've said to Brandon, correlation is not causation, and I think he got tired of hearing that from me. But then, after a while, it sort of it started making a lot of sense, and it becomes a very helpful lens through which to view some of these really suggestive and, as I said, sometimes spooky things that have happened. So I'll give you an example of a whole class of things that I can speak to. I've spoken about it publicly, and that actually factors in, interestingly, into the story. And this has to do with a device, or a car, actually. I had a vehicle that I drove to and from the ranch. Had this vehicle for a few years. It wasn't near end of life or anything like that. There weren't any problems with it. You can probably already sense where I'm going with this. Sometimes I'd come out and return home, and there were no issues, nothing nothing suggestive of any kind of a hitchhiker. There was a trip that I took on one occasion when I had to head back late in the evening, and I was playing around with the GPS function on my phone. Just looking at, sometimes it's entertaining to see where you are on the road. Some of those roads are long and dark and boring. So as I was leaving the ranch, I took a look at my GPS sensor and looked at the estimated time to get home, and it said something like 13 and a half hours, which, I don't live that far away from the ranch. My home is about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. And I thought, well, why is it saying that? And then I get to looking at the map, and I realized that it had me placed somewhere just west of central Kansas. It's just an instrumentation issue. That doesn't mean necessarily or prove anything unusual going on there. But this is where things get interesting. I drive home. The trip is uneventful. Park the car in the driveway. The next morning, I go out to start the vehicle, and it's non-responsive to the remote, to the key fob. I just assumed that the battery in the key fob must have died. I manually opened the car, got inside the car, tried to start it, and all kinds of sounds were coming out of the beeping sound that you normally get when you start your car wasn't normal.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of flickering on the panel. It's all very I'm just telling you how it is. I mean, the things were flashing on the panel, and nothing was working. I couldn't start the car. I didn't make any connections to the ranch necessarily. I was perturbed and worried because I needed to get somewhere. I requested that someone come out to help jumpstart the vehicle. We did that. The vehicle was running very rough. In other words, even idling, it seemed to be having either some kind of problem with the timing, the ignition, or perhaps there was some electrical short somewhere. Even then, as a physicist and someone who's worked as an engineer, I'm just thinking about this as a mundane problem that was inconvenient. So there's nothing all that sensational about this story, but here's the interesting twist. After replacing a battery in that car, the battery was not at end of life, but it was very dead. Replacing the battery, it's as if the car ran rough for a little while, but then it was just fine for a period of years. I'm not really sure, but I could speculate that perhaps the timing, something in the ignition might have needed to retrain itself. I really don't know, in order to run smoothly, but it did. There was no intervention. We didn't service the vehicle other than changing the battery. Now, I shared this story at a meeting that we have out here in Vernal. There's an event by the name of Phenomicon.
Yeah.
When I was being asked, "Hey, Erik, have you, is there anything you can share with us of related to this obviously very interesting question to a lot of people, this whole hitchhiker effect?" And so I told the story, and I said, this is something I'm comfortable telling. There have been some other things, but this one I think is fairly safe. I shared this story with, goodness, I don't know how many people were in the room, but it was hundreds. And within about an hour or two, I got a frantic message from my wife, who informed me that she was stranded with one of my children in a parking lot. And she described to me the behavior of the car. And it was exactly what had happened on the occasion that I just told you about. And she had roadside assistants come out and take a look at the vehicle and do some diagnostics with it. And her description to me was that anything that could be wrong with the car was wrong with the car, according to the diagnostics. Now, the timing's really suggestive. And this is where, I might need Brandon to remind me, hey, correlation is not causation, but boy, that's suggestive. Because it would seem that, again, there's a chain of events. I'm at the ranch. There's something funny going on with the GPS. I get home. The next morning, the car's misbehaving. After that, the problem self-resolves. And then within hours of telling the story to a room full of people, it happens again. We no longer have that car.
Right. That honestly, that sounds like a mild Skinwalker effect. It's electronics. The
Yes.
timing seems to have a synchronicity. A lot of people get like dark shadows. I've actually had hitchhiker effects in my home myself. I've seen dark shadows. I've experienced that fully awake at night. Mm-hmm. So I know what that's like, and it's not something you want to talk about because you're afraid of that social contagion. What I'm wondering is that a real barrier? Is that a real barrier that if you actually talk about
data? Can you back that up? Do you have
absolutely not? I can't prove it.
I love that
when I was a kid. When I was a kid.
I have some data.
Charles.
And I won't go into the whole story here because I'd rather you guys talk, but I saw one in my home. I'd never seen anything like that before. I put a camera in the spot, and within a week, I ended up catching something on the camera, but it's not the smoking gun because it doesn't seem like you're allowed to have the smoking gun with this type of phenomenon. But I caught something blocked out all of the infrared lights on a motion sensing IR camera, motion tracking. That camera didn't pick up anything at all, but the lights went out in such a way that it was like something moved in front of the lights, blocked them out for about 14 seconds, and then moved out of the way. I tried to replicate it, turning the lights off, unplugging it, couldn't replicate it. I have the video. I've experienced a lot of weird stuff like that where, it's always, you look at it and you go, well, I could explain it, but it's kind of hard. And eventually that keeps happening and you start to go, this seems pretty weird, and that was kind of how I got into all this stuff, was started having increasingly unlikely experiences happen. And then And I was a materialist when all of that happened. I went through all the ontological shock and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm curious, and I understand your reticence to talk about it, Erik, because of the stigma. And I'm
Yes.
wondering if you're simply willing to say yes or no, whether you've had more dramatic instances than just the car, things that you're not willing to go into detail on, but just go yes or no.
Yes, very much so. The stories are involved. You know, you use the term social contagion. And one interpretation of that that's working in my head right now really goes to the center of why I don't say much about this sort of thing. You know, I think of myself as a steward of a narrative. You know, besides being an investigator and, you know, being a steward of, I guess, the physicality of our investigation, you know, the equipment, the data, and so forth. You know, I am concerned about even giving tacit approval to what may be someone's, let's just say, confirmation bias or fears, you know, whatever it may be. I'm you know, like, I'm not trying to broadcast, you know, to virtue signal here, but it does concern me that, given the megaphone that we have here with the documentary work, that I don't seem to be advocating for a supernatural first order interpretation of events like the ones that I just shared, or the one that I just described. Yeah, I have heard those reports. I have wondered how well the things that were described to me would stand up to scrutiny, prosaic treatment. You know, might there be a simple explanation? For example, you know, I listened to what you just described with a shadow moving across a camera, and interestingly, the 14 seconds that now, did I understand right? These are 14 lost seconds or 14 seconds of dwell time?
It was caught on a different camera that was actually coincidentally aiming in the same area, and I could see all of the IR lights go out for 14 seconds around there.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you. Okay, I should probably stay on my train of thought here, but I'll come back to something. So, you know, if I look at an event similar to the one that you've just described, you know, especially with our insiders watching the live stream, and we see something happen that would seem to modulate the infrared flood lighting that we sometimes activate on our cameras. You know, some of the first things that I look for are, do I have something that nature's prone to throw at us on the camera in front of the illuminators? You know, all the mundane stuff, right? And I really do encourage us to go through that, not to explain it away. And I think Travis is very vocal about, you know, don't just try to explain things away. That's not the agenda. But in a sense of due diligence, to just say, okay, you know, we're on a ranch. We have all sorts of things that are, you know, bugs and so forth that might crawl on the cameras, flying insects, animals, you name it. And we've definitely captured instances where those are the confirmed causes of things going on with cameras. So we start with that, or I tend to, and then if that type of analysis doesn't bring closure to the event, then we start looking at it from that more interesting perspective of, might we be looking at yet another manifestation of the phenomenology? Now, the 14 seconds I found interesting in your comment, because and we've talked about this, I think, publicly. There was an instance in which Travis was awakened by something during one of the earlier seasons. He got up out of bed, went outside, was checking for whatever it was that had disturbed him. He goes back inside, and when we were reviewing the footage to try to determine what had interfered with his sleep, we ended up with 14 seconds of missing footage.
And if I remember correctly, didn't Travis say that the cameras and they turned off one after another, kind of as he was walking outside of his trailer, like he was in his skivvies or something? And
okay, so you're
he went to the command center.
Yes. Something like that, yeah. And he had asked me to review the footage, which I did. And, you know, I said, well, look here, you know, the time literally jumps and it's a 14-second delta, just missing time, missing footage. Again, I like the way you describe it. I think you said, is it a smoking gun or is it proof of anything? No, it's not. But enough of these events, they sort of self-assemble into a very suggestive body that say, okay, we're kind of on the surface of something unusual going on that we don't see in other environments.
Yeah.
Just to close the loop and make it clear, I have no problem discussing these topics. Even though I try to approach these topics with humility, I'm not trying to, I don't believe that discussing the topics is going to invite some type of phenomena into my personal space. I see nothing. I see no data, no evidence that would support that. So
excellent. So the hitchhiker effect and the possible social contagion of it did not play into your comment about after this next season, people are going to need therapy. They're going to be messed up. It's not that you think there's going to be a mass infection of this hitchhiker effect by the end of the season, because theoretically that could happen, right?
That's an interesting movie idea, but
you're getting calls already. I'm not trying to create a lawsuit for you.
Yeah,
no. Who would be liable if that did happen? What if that happened?
When I made that statement, it was just simply the fact that I believe that which we are presenting in the weeks ahead. I think people will either have to concede that there's something truly interesting and unusual happening that we are documenting and presenting to the public, or they're going to have to ignorantly, or whatever, in frustrations, believe that we are fabricating this.
So once they concede that this is real, what are you expecting is going to happen next with them?
I don't know, because it's hard to know what is actionable. What are
they supposed to do if they have that conversion, that experience at the end of the season?
Most people, let's face it, most people don't want, at the end of the day, they don't want their paradigm turned upside down. They don't want their stability. They don't want their 401k and go to Disney with the family once a year.
Right.
And their predictable carrot and stick and if then proposition compromised. And I think that what we are addressing and what we are presenting with our investigation potentially calls all that into question. The nature of reality itself, to some degree, I think has to be redefined when faced with the documented evidence that we continue to put forward.
What you're talking about is ontological shock, and that's what you want to see, or at least that would be the outcome.
Well, I think that's inevitable. It's not that I want to see it, although I think it's it's
healthy. Say it. It's healthy.
No, I don't know that it's healthy. I think life is a journey. It's a learning process. And I think I've had a number of moments in my life where I have been slapped awake. I said earlier, I acquired this ranch as a healthy skeptic, as someone who believed that there was most likely a natural prosaic explanation. In fact, when Erik and I first engaged, Erik cautioned me and said, now, Brandon, you need to be aware that there's luminous phenomena in nature that has natural explanation. You need to be very careful about anything that you may think is documented or observed on the ranch that you may or others may constitute as unusual or paranormal. And he was right. He was absolutely right. But I've had to reevaluate my entire perspective and position relative to these topics because of that which I have witnessed with my own eyes, with others standing by my side, witnessing the same thing. And you don't come back. There's no way of rewinding. You know, once you make that leap from healthy, open-minded skeptic to experiencer, and you bypass believer or simply believing, and you've experienced it, and it is undeniable.
Right.
And there are other witnesses and other correlating events with that underscore the reality of what was witnessed. It changes one's perspective forever. And I think, to a degree, I think our docuseries is bringing to the public, for the first time, truly credible documentary evidence of unexplained phenomena. Ask away.
Dean, you got any questions?
Well, yeah, I've got quite a few. We've got about a half hour left. There's a couple of things we definitely want to hit on in this first episode. Is that okay? Charles, you got anything else before I go into my rant?
No, you're going to cover most of the stuff. I think I will. So I'll let you take the lead right now.
So this is where I get into sort of a rant. I sort of get into rapid questions, Brandon. So might cut you off if you get too long. Erik, might get you to chime in as well. These are just some top things that we have to deal with almost on a daily basis.
So this is very interesting to me then.
Okay, so
this will be fun.
This is just rapid stuff. I'm going to hit you up really hard. Okay. So first of all, we get this all the time. Brandon is just in it for the money. He's making a shit ton of money from the History Channel for this, and everything else flows from that. The acting, the same brown shirt that Erik always wears. This is all staged so that Brandon makes a lot of money from the History Channel. I always quote you because you said on a couple of interviews, you don't make a dime off the show. And that's what I quote. And people say, yeah, that's because he takes the money in nickels. Are you getting dimes or nickels? Or you need to explain this in detail. How is it that you don't make any money on the show? That doesn't make sense. How can you not make any money?
I've donated any proceeds that would be due to me. I donate or transfer, for the most part, to philanthropic efforts, to charitable endeavors and other causes.
Can you name those causes? Can you name them?
Utah Valley University, for one, scholarships associated with single mothers, cancer research. In fact, transferred assigned funds that were due to me for research dealing with cancer, a whole host of things. I've never taken a penny personally. I don't intend to. I've never opened a bank account for Adamantium Real Estate LLC, which is the legal entity that governs the property, the special purpose entity.
Yeah, that was my next question.
And I'm benefiting the least, it could be argued, from the from going public. If anything, and I do say this quite a bit, this is a bigger liability to me than any type of benefit. The liability to me professionally, financially, and otherwise is, the loss of privacy. I could go on, but it is what it is. I made a decision, and as we mentioned earlier, I'm not saving anything for the swim back. I'm all in.
Great.
Let me head this off at the pass. I know people are going to say, oh, he's probably funding the money to the church. They say that for some reason that the religion motivates your investigation on the ranch.
Nope, none of it's going to any religious organization. It's all to other organizations or philanthropic efforts such as those that I just mentioned. Not that it's anyone's damn business. I'm always quite amused by the level of entitlement by the public, but in the interest of transparency, integrity, and putting it all out on the table, No, I have yet to put one penny in my pocket relative to Skinwalker Ranch, and I don't intend to take any money and put it in any account or buy anything personally. All of those proceeds are being transferred or assigned to other worthy causes and endeavors. I want to make sure that that there is no question relative to my motives. I am not exploiting my stewardship of the ranch or involvement in any way for financial gain or frankly otherwise. I'm in this. I'm just like you. I want the truth.
Okay. So
I'm willing to share the truth, unlike others in this same realm of investigation. I mean, most of my, I guess you could call them peers, if you want to put it loosely, but others that delve into these topics that are leadership figures in this, in these topics, none of them subject themselves to the level of scrutiny that I have allowed, nor engaged or as transparent as I am.
Yeah, you really do answer any question.
Everyone.
Yes.
That should send a clear signal.
Yeah.
I love these questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, you will answer any question, which I appreciate. We also get a lot of questions about, the involvement that the LDS Church officials have in the ranch, because on the show you actually advise like the former governor and the attorney general. Are you briefing LDS Church leaders? Are you briefing them at all? The first presidency or anything like that?
There's absolutely no exchange, no dialogue taking place with leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints relative to the ranch, and there's no connection. I find the connection that some so-called journalists have tried to make between our effort or our backgrounds and the religious organization. I find them to be disingenuous, and that's putting it mildly. Anyone who does their due diligence and asks questions just like you're asking will find out very, very quickly that a good share of our core team, as well as participants, do not affiliate with any religious organization. And I myself am not really, I haven't briefed or engaged any religious organization relative to my ownership or involvement.
Excellent. I'm glad you cleared that up. The next one is people, especially on Twitter, have actually done the deep dive into adamantium and tried to figure out who owns the ranch. How are you shuffling the money around? And they can't really figure it out because you've got these different companies, right? You kind of hid your. Why? Can you explain why are you hiding your ownership of the ranch in that way, where researchers can't really? You know what I'm saying? It smacks of deception. So can you explain how you got there?
Yeah, let me clear that out. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it. For one thing, most people who do comment on it are total dumbasses. They don't really do their due diligence because they find
you don't make it easy either.
Yeah, well, it's easier than you may think. I established Adamantium Real Estate LLC, I believe in March of 2016, literally days in advance of closing on the acquisition of the assemblage from the Bigelow entity. I structured it as a special purpose vehicle to own the property. It does not have a bank account. The Adamantium Real Estate has never taken any income. With the exception of my wife, who oversees legal affairs, it really doesn't have anyone else affiliated with it other than me. My wife, she's not receiving any compensation relative to overseeing legal affairs and being the intermediary between us and several law firms that represent our interests and outsiders. Point of clarification: one of my attorney that assisted with structuring that enterprise back in 2016 was named as the managing member or manager of the enterprise to shield my identity. I did not want my name in any way. When I set it up as a Delaware enterprise, I did not want my name anywhere associated with Skinwalker Ranch or any of these topics. Quite the contrary. I never imagined a day. I never imagined a day where I would go public and vocalize that or disclose that I was ultimately the 100% ownership interest of Adamantium Real Estate LLC. And I wanted to shield that. I had not disclosed that to my family.
Yeah, you were leading a double life. Is that fair to say? You were leading a double life. Your family didn't even know you owned the ranch.
No, I kept it very, very, very private for a number of reasons, and I didn't want any of these topics or my ownership of the ranch in any way to undermine my business interests, my conventional business interests in the community. And so I don't know if that answered the question, but there are other adamantiums. So it's so funny. People will find, I think there's an adamantium enterprise in Utah that's organized, that's in Murray, Utah, that sells trailer hitches or something like that. They have absolutely no relationship to me, that have filed papers that are noted in, different, I don't know, Dun and Bradstreet, but they're the only entity that I have relative to the ranch that is involved with the ownership is Adamantium Real Estate LLC.
Okay, so in addition to the ranch, you also own specific trademarks.
Correct.
Which ones? Can you give us the whole list? It's Skinwalker Ranch.
Two. It's quite easy. I own the trademark to Skinwalker and Skinwalker Ranch. Period. When we went ahead and filed to protect those marks and went through the process, I leaned on my legal counsel to protect the integrity of the identity of these topics, and both the Skinwalker and Skinwalker Ranch marks, not for purposes of exploitation. It was for purposes of being able to eliminate bad actors.
Yeah, exactly.
And those that would misrepresent,
right,
exaggerate, or potentially compromise the integrity and of the efforts that I'm trying to put forward to really study these very topics and those names essentially. And so the fact that back in 2016, along with a whole litany, or 2017, along with a whole litany of things involving media, books, magazines, you name it, that they listed in really the trademark protection. The fact that I didn't list scientific instrumentation or go even no, that's more attributed. That's more attributed to my attorneys at the time, just trying, and it was really speaking to the bad actors, because let's face it, no one else is investing millions of dollars into scientific investigation relative to Skinwalker or Skinwalker Ranch related topics.
Right.
And so I find it quite silly when people, including some so-called journalists, that try to point to that as somehow some knock on my credibility or my motives, when in fact all I was doing is trying to lay the groundwork and trying to protect the integrity of an effort that I had no intention of ever revealing my identity as owner in.
Right. Yeah. Well, for you to buy the ranch and not get the brand for Skinwalker and Skinwalker Ranch, you would have been a fool, because you're right. It would have a lot of bad actors involved. There's a lot of confusion. You're responsible for the legacy of this.
I have had to unfortunately take action against several people who have either breached their NDA or confidentiality agreements, or have done things that are frankly illegal or inappropriate relative to, against us, against our effort. And I feel like all we are trying to do is conduct an investigation of a property that is reported phenomena for decades, if not millennia, and allow the public to be privy to that material.
Yeah.
Anyways, next
so
question.
Real quick, I'm trying to wrap this up. You do license agreements, right? If someone wants to write a book and use the name Skinwalker on it, you will do a license agreement with them potentially?
All the time.
All the time.
You bet.
What if somebody wants to set up a little store in downtown Roosevelt? Skinwalker shop has all kinds of paraphernalia, mugs, t-shirts. Would you license it?
Yeah. They can talk to my legal team, and as long as there are certain conditions met, and as long as they're working cooperatively with us, I don't see any problem with that. We have granted a number of licenses to people relative to merch and also books. By the way, not receiving it, we're not trying to monetize it. We're trying to protect the integrity of the marks.
Okay.
So yes.
So it's really quality versus how much money they're going to make, how much money you want to make. You're really trying to protect the integrity of the brand.
Yeah.
Basically. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I think we got that out of the way. You keep bringing up something that we probably need to mention, and that's Stephen Greenstreet. You've mentioned him sort of in passing, but he's getting a lot of attention lately. And I personally don't feel you got your side of the story told on that. Even though you did sort of rant on one of your insiders, right? And he used the clip on the video that he presented as well.
Right.
Can you clear the air?
He used the clip illegally. He basically took a clip that he obtained as an insider and breached the agreement and posted it on public forum. I mean, talk about ethical issues here. I mean, that's a serious issue. I mean, I'd be happy to address it. I think it's a waste of time, simply because it's like giving credibility to, someone screaming down the street that really doesn't have.
No, what I was wondering is if you just had something that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say when that all went down. Because it seems like he got the last word, and there was some misrepresentations in there from my perspective.
Yeah, he got the last word on his thing, but we get the last word because all you have to do is watch how I govern myself versus how he governs himself. Look at the quality and the integrity associated with our effort versus the that which continues to be exhibited in those other forums. And I'll just say it speaks for itself. I feel like my reputation speaks for itself. Look at my social media feed, look at my professional endeavors, look at how we continue to govern ourselves relative to the ranch, how we engage with the public, with our insiders, even with you.
Yeah.
And you contrast that with the behavior and the actions of certain individuals who've taken an adversarial and even a mocking tone, a disrespectful tone and position against us. And anyone paying attention, hopefully that has eyes and ears, can see that there is a distinct difference.
Fair
Absolutely.
enough. Charles, you want to talk a little bit?
Yeah, I got a question for Erik. This comes up, it will not die, the 1.6 gigahertz signal. People are constantly saying, oh, it's a satellite band. It's a satellite frequency. You can look it up on the FCC charts and it's right there. And we keep telling people that's been ruled out. And they're like, well, how do we know it's been ruled out? So can you talk about that a bit?
Okay. Well, I guess, first of all, I find it kind of gratifying that people are being motivated by the topic itself to go do whatever research they need to do in order to find that out. I mean, honestly, that is one of the deliverables of the discourse. But I can speak to, if we want to talk technical, I could speak to what it is about that general vicinity around 1.6 gigahertz that has drawn our attention, sort of what the genealogy of that is and what the current status is, if you'd like for me to do that.
Absolutely. Let's get this thing, let's stop beating this dead horse.
I've touched on this so many times. And I think some of our insiders have used commentary, and I consider it really a service to me, so that maybe I'll have to repeat this fewer times in the future. They've lined it out just as I've tried to spell it out. So I'd like to back up into pre the documentary work in order to ground the story. Obviously, one of the things that we were prompted to take a look at high level in our discussions with those who went before us. I'm speaking of some of the personnel involved with the NIDS and BAS work. One of the things they were looking at, of course, was the RF spectrum. It's an obvious target for investigation, and a fairly easy one across a certain range. And so historically, from the very earliest days when I could do a remote instrumented vigil, I kept what we would call a software definable radio, or an RF spectrum analyzer, running on the property at all times with antennas, here in the East Field. And I took a special interest, I have to say, to really the lower end of the frequency spectrum. This is before we ran into this 1.6 sort of pathology. There were lots of places within, across that RF spectrum. We're talking about, low frequencies, intermediate frequencies, across the radio dial, if you will, and then all the way up into frequencies that might be used by Wi-Fi in the gigahertz range. So all the way across there, looking at it at a window at a time, I began building up a map of signals that looked as if they belonged versus those that did not, or that behaved, as I would say, badly, in the sense that they, if you see a peak and that peak is, really spilling out into other what would be channels, or meandering around or something like that. I took interest in that and just sort of build my own sense of the pattern of life for the radio frequency electromagnetic environment. I did not, prior to the filming activity, have a special interest in any specific range. 1.6 gigahertz was not really on my radar. Now, to the genealogy, we were conducting an exercise in our first season high up on the mesa in the west. We had with us a geologist who also happened to carry a handheld RF spectrum analyzer. And during the shooting of one of the part of that investigation up there into a kind of cavern, a small opening in the side of the mesa, several things happened in succession. We noticed, of course, this flow of very cold air coming out of what may have been something like you might think of it as a duct, going down into the bowels of the mesa. That was interesting to us. But then there was also the very subjective, potentially medically relevant experience that Travis described. He said, look, I'm starting to feel strange up here. I'm feeling a bit off, and it's not going away. It's bothering me. I just need to escalate this and make everyone aware we might need to get out of here, or at least, he needed to get out of there. And at that time, the gentleman who had the RF spectrum analyzer noticed that there was a very strong peak in the vicinity of about 1.6 gigahertz. More interestingly, as we took that handheld instrument and moved it around in the interior of that cavern, we noticed that the intensity of that peak, if you will, was greatest right at that point where we were getting the flow of cold air coming out of the interior of the mesa. So those events in and of themselves prove nothing, but there is an interesting correlation. And look, we're not here to ignore correlations. Just because correlation isn't causation doesn't mean we ignore it. And so we began investigating that part of the RF spectrum more frequently than we might have otherwise if that hadn't happened. And my first conjecture was, oh my gosh, that looks like iridium, or that meaning the satellites or some other satellite. That was the very first thought that I had concerning that. However, what was interesting is the modulation of this signal. It would emerge at certain times and then disappear entirely. Well, of course, satellites can drive that sort of thing. But then there's also the behavior overall of what's happening in that part of the spectrum. There are a couple of things. It isn't just a peak. And both Travis and I have spoken to this, in other venues. Yes, we see peaks, and sometimes we see multiple peaks, and they're moving around. And I call that bad behavior, because nominally we'd expect these peaks to, occupy a specific range and sit still, if you will. They don't appear to be playing by the rules. Now, again, there could be some esoteric sort of technical reason for that. But the other interesting thing that we see happening in that range from, I want to say, 1.5 to 1.8 or so gigahertz is that the entire noise floor, the static, if you will, sometimes takes a hit, and the energy in that range of the spectrum goes much higher than normal without an assignable cause. We don't know why we're seeing this. So we're seeing these big fluctuations, if you will, in the noise floor. So it's interesting, but again, it's the correlation of these events with things that we're doing, our activities, our experiments out on the ranch, that has maintained our interest in that part of the spectrum. But we are not exclusively interested in something in the vicinity of 1.6 gigahertz.
Yeah, the reason I think people keep bringing it up is because, people want to solve the problems that they see on Skinwalker Ranch. People want to get involved. They want to feel like,
I love it.
They can play a part. And I think what really excites people is when they're like, aha, I figured this out, and those guys didn't.
I love that you said that, Charles, because the truth is, I'm the last guy to deprive anybody of their aha moment. In fact, I want to inspire them, and sometimes, in fact, often I'll sit quiet and I will allow myself to be the sounding board, or if you will, the student of whoever is having that epiphany, because I consider that really constructive. Again, I came into this work, defiantly declaring my defiance of human nature, if you will. In other words, pride, when I said I am determined to be caught red-handed in the act of learning. And so I don't have any allergy to hearing out people's discovery and their pleasure with exploring that topic and finding that, yes, there are assignable causes in that range for peaks, and certainly there are. It's not the mere existence of a peak there that interests us, and maybe that doesn't quite come through in the documentary work. But I kind of like that fact because it gives us something to talk about. The reality is we have some really interesting things going on across as much of the RF spectrum as we can measure out here. This is a very, very, I would say, noisy environment.
And do you attribute that to potential military? I mean, there's clearly military interest at the ranch.
Yeah.
We're seeing that in this season. And of course, a lot of people are like, oh, Bigelow was involved in black research projects and he hid the stuff, The latest episode, it was like, gosh, maybe something crashed into the side of the mesa, left that debris, and Bigelow dug trenches with a bulldozer and buried it. And that's why you're finding the same stuff in the mesa that, whatever. But military stuff,
I love that theory.
Okay. This may or may not be a good behavior on the part of a principal investigator in a context like this, but what you see is what you get. I'm it. And I actually celebrate the fact that this kind of thinking is going on. If we're inspiring this kind of thinking, look, it is good thinking. People are working with the raw materials they have available to them. And so I don't want to shut that down. What can I say? I mean, yes, there are a lot of things that line up, but I caution, and you've probably heard me do this. I caution people not to act under the influence of a craven desire for closure. Do we want closure or do we want the truth? And, rather than to champion what my grandfather would have once called a lovely hypothesis as he smiled and winked at me. Rather than to get too in love with a pet theory, I just allow those. I allow all of those possible explanations to just find their support organically. I know that some people find that a very frustrating outlook for me to take or for me to have, but there are multiple sandboxes for just about any of these issues, meaning explanatory sandboxes. And so, could it be otherworldly craft? Could it be military involvement? That's one of the sandboxes. But I started out in this work not quite with a bias, but with a hunch that maybe geophysics and atmospheric physics play a role here. We'll see. That's why it's called an investigation.
I was just going to say, I've gotten the impression Travis thinks there may be a portal involved, but I'm just making a joke. I'm not going to get into that, but I really appreciate that. My last question was going to be, and I'm sure Dean has one, was just going to be, where do you guys see this going? What do you want to see come out of this at the end?
I'll tell you my end game, and maybe it's an unrealistic. I want to understand the origin and agenda associated with the phenomena that we continue to document at Skinwalker Ranch and that others have been witness to. That's my goal. I see Skinwalker Ranch as a living laboratory, as a very unique environment for the last 27 some odd years has been locked down. It is often referred to Private Area 51, but I think it's much, much more than that. And we are working to determine, what is really happening and share it with the public. And I'm excited to see this unfold. I'm excited for what we have to reveal in the weeks ahead. And I think this journey that we're on, this journey of discovery, is quite a thrill.
I like how you said that. I like how you said that because what was going through my mind before you said that last sentence was that the joy in discovery has to be considered one of the deliverables. I guess the answer may be different for everyone who is either intellectually or emotionally engaging with the topic. The good news is there doesn't have to be just one deliverable. That we do not step forward in the public facing work with the title under the title, the answer of Skinwalker Ranch, right? We aren't doing that. But we are investigating, and we do take pride in our work. We take pride in the tools and methods that we apply, and also in the discourse of which we are stewards. And so, I think that if some of the habits that we put on display or that we learn ourselves and then put on display, through this work, find their way into the public discourse, maybe on other topics that have non-obvious connections to what we're doing, I would call that a win. I'm talking about things like, there's a kind of a textbook word, or phrase that I like to use, epistemic humility, which doesn't, it seems to be kind of in short supply these days when it comes to our discourse on a lot of perhaps more practical issues, socially relevant issues. And so, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that, one of the deliverables of the public facing work is to encourage taking some of the habits here and transferring them into other parts of our lives.
That's profound.
I didn't mean to be profound, but I guess it is.
No, that was. You're bringing it all the way back to home. So we're a 2-hour mark, so we need to wrap this up for you guys. We respect your time, but I did have 2 ending questions. Very important. First one is quick. The other one takes a little longer. So the first question is, are we on the same page that we're dealing with the non-human intelligence? We call it the phenomenon. We call it the ranch. Erik, will you agree with me that it's a non-human intelligence of some kind?
Okay. I
Just
find
that
support for
simple.
that.
What?
I do find support for that. I think we all are witnesses to support for the interpretation of what's going on here. I think the phrase that was given to us was a sentient, precognitive, non-human intelligence,
There you
and
go.
I can definitely sympathize with that interpretation on the parts of those who went before. Very suggestive, circumstantial and timing, that you've seen as it actually played out again and again and again through the documentary work. So it sure does look like there's volition involved.
Okay. So we're on the same page. Okay. How about you, Brandon?
I think so.
Non-human intelligence?
Yeah, I second Erik's statement. Well stated.
Excellent. Great. I think Charles and I are in agreement as well. I want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we are definitely finding support for that.
Okay, great. So the next question, my last one, is you guys know that there's a lot going on in the world right now around this whole phenomenon, right? There's some stuff going on back east with Congress. There's some whistleblowers, some articles in the news right now. We're recording this on June 14th, 2023. So I sort of want to make this a time capsule. You guys talk to your future selves, people that may listen to this in the future. Do you guys have the sense that I'm hearing from other people that there is a big disclosure happening sometime this summer? It's just a big disclosure of information. This isn't the end of the world or doom, or it's not maybe not even first contact, but do you get a sense that this is building, that what you guys are doing, what you're going to be releasing in the next episodes, sort of, you just feel it in the community itself? Do you know what I'm talking about, Erik? Do you sense that there's an overwhelming,
I think I do.
There's a movement for a big disclosure this summer?
I wouldn't even attempt to forecast something like that. This would be a good time to be talking to Travis Taylor.
But do you have a sense that something might be coming out? There might be some revelation.
Yeah. You're asking me what I think what my hunches tell me, right?
Yeah.
My expectations when it comes to things like disclosure have been low historically. I'm trying to be polite about this. Let me be a little less polite. Some of the things that were put out there, and where there was some lead in, there was some build up prior to what was supposed to be a disclosure, at least to my taste buds, tasted a lot like a nothing sandwich. I think that is less and less the case as time goes forward. These days, we're hearing some things that are, if nothing else, they certainly are unambiguous, on the parts of some of the people you mentioned, whistleblowing.
Yeah.
There's some pretty bold statements being made there, right?
Right now, this week.
Yes, and I'm well aware. So, I've been aware of, through channels, I've been aware of some of what might be coming down the pipe, but I do not have the crystal ball on this.
Okay. How about you, Brandon?
I don't really consider our effort to be part of some orchestrated disclosure effort. We're conducting a research investigation, a property that commenced under my stewardship in April of 2016, and we have continued to pour resources into this effort. And I think we are presenting some of the best documentary evidence ever on record that there is something unusual going on in our world. How that relates to what is happening in the news, what kind of connection. Right now, we have our heads down. We are so laser focused on what we are doing that I try not to get swept up in a lot of these things. You probably notice, if you follow me on public forum on social media, I have purposely veered away from commenting on the most recent news, not because I lack interest. I would say I'm definitely putting my money where my mouth is relative to these topics. So I have a lot of it. But I'm reserving judgment. now I'm going to sound like the very critics, skeptics, those who are adversarial toward me and our efforts. And I'll say, show me the data. At some point, we have to take this beyond anecdotal accounts, beyond stories that are passed down, that are secondhand, thirdhand. And this is not to be disparaging toward anyone who has had the courage to come forward, that is in a position of credibility, or coming forward with what they believe to be an informed perspective. I'm reserving judgment until I see more substantive data relative to some of the claims outside of the scope of our work.
Yeah.
That isn't to say that I'm critical. That isn't to say that I don't believe a lot of what has been presented. I've been very public about the fact that I believe the Wilson Davis memo is an accurate accounting of a very real dialogue that took place. Really? And a lot of people think that's a bombshell statement, but it's the damn truth.
But that's a pretty, that is a bombshell statement to make.
Yeah. And I have done my due diligence. I feel like I've conducted enough due diligence, sufficient due diligence to conclude that those conversations took place. Now, have I been able to verify the credibility behind the claims or some of the conclusions made in the Wilson Davis memo? No, of course not. No one has yet. But it seems, I believe it's highly credible. I would love to see more people come forward that have information, that have data, that are willing to be courageous. There are those that come forward that are trying to gain attention, that are trying to sensationalize and profit from these topics in one way, shape, or form, whether it be ego, whether it be monetarily. And there are those, most recently, that I believe probably have more to lose by coming forward, and more liability, like me, coming forward with these topics in the long run than anything. And I have to respect those people. I have to respect Robert Bigelow. The fact that someone who is a respected member of the business community, who has put his money where his mouth is, has gone on 60 Minutes and other media and has definitively made statements in support of these topics and claims, it's noteworthy. And I have to respect that. Anyone who's willing to put their money and their reputation where their mouth is, and there are very few. Do you notice?
Yes, there's very few.
Do you notice how vacant? And I don't think it's because these topics are not credible, or these claims. I think it is a treacherous path when you open yourself up. There are interests, and this is not to sound conspiratorial. This is just a fact. There are certain interests out there that want these topics completely deleted from the public discourse.
Absolutely.
There are people in positions of authority that believe that these topics involve demonic or satanic entities, and that they are inappropriate to even discuss. There are those that believe that they're doing the public some service by being not only critical but highly hostile toward not only these topics, but anyone who has the courage to come forward with their own firsthand accounts or witness accounts relative to these things. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I want you to know I respect those who have courage to come forward, that are focused on the truth and are hell-bent on bringing that truth forward to the general public, even to their own detriment. Thank heavens. We need more We need more courageous people who are not afraid, that are not so protective of their own little safety blanket. Most people do not want to say or do anything that will compromise their living, their job, their profession,
Yep,
their reputation. And I've lost track of the number of highly credible executives, individuals, professionals who have come forward privately and related their own firsthand accounts dealing with everything from UFO sightings or close encounters or other phenomena that seems to play in this realm. And they are very hesitant to come forward because it's not pretty.
but
It's
they come
not
to
for
you.
the
Yeah, but they come to
And-
you. That you get the calls because you own Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, and people are saying they're saying congratulations, you're getting some great publicity, and then they say condolences. They say, well, thank you for fighting the good fight. A lot of people are saying you're doing that which you're doing and coming forward with that which the majority of the public who have had these experiences, undeniable experiences, that are just simply not willing to collateral damage and the liability associated with it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't judge those people. As much as I sound like I'm being critical or negative, I do understand, because it comes at a price.
Yeah.
Anyone who's attention sees that. I mean, Erik as principal investigator, as a credentialed scientist who has been involved with patenting, innovations that are commercialized, that are all over the world. I mean, Erik, at great personal risk, has engaged as principal investigator and is diving into these topics and not leaving anything for the swim back.
I'm so glad you said that, Brandon, because you're talking to a lot of people that are listening to this. We know because they're on the forum who've had these experiences, and they're quite often
You're not alone.
Okay, that's the point.
Those of you,
right?
Those of you out there, those of you who are watching, who are paying attention, that have had experiences that they cannot deny, you are not alone. There are countless people in the world that are experiencing these things on a daily basis, and they are real. They are physical. They are real events. They are tangible manifestations and tangible witnesses of the phenomenon. And I just want everyone to know, not crazy, and I respect those that that are not willing to come forward. There are people that have had experiences on Skinwalker Ranch predating the Shermans, predating the Bigelow era.
Yep.
That have had experiences that are afraid to come forward publicly because they know it could turn their personal lives upside down. And I have to respect that.
Good. I feel that's hitting a lot close to home for me that you said that. I want to make sure that everyone that's watching this, you're not alone, and you can actually reach out to other people. The way to do that is to post comments or questions below in the video, and maybe you'll find somebody else that can share an experience as well. And also come to the Reddit, Skinwalker Ranch forum, and you can share things there. But you're not alone, and I think a lot of people do actually feel that way. I also get the sense that this is growing, that it's coming to some kind of a head. Maybe not this summer, but the truth is going to come out. This ball is rolling too much, right? It's a snowball coming down the mountain.
Dean, the truth is already out there. I mean, it's real. The phenomena is real.
Right.
There is no question. The phenomena is absolutely real. Now, understanding the origin and the agenda are, who are some of the secret keepers, who is suppressing the data, the evidence. Yeah, that's another exercise. But it is absolutely, anyone who does their due diligence relative to these topics and is honest and takes a real serious look will be able to see that there are things that defy any natural explanation, and it's happening more often than you would think.
Exactly.
That's another thing. Of all of the things that happen, all of the sightings that occur, all of the strange events that are witnessed, I'm convinced that maybe, I don't even know what the ratio is, maybe 1 out of 100 end up even being discussed in any type of public forum or shared with even loved ones.
Right.
Based on what I have observed and documented over the last 7+ years of my stewardship. So you think how many incidents have occurred, how many things are happening on a day-to-day basis that are going unreported. I mean, you look at something, not to go down a rabbit hole in conclusion here, but you take something like the cattle mutilation phenomena. I mean, over 10,000 documented cases in the United States alone that have been documented and reported that it's the greatest unsolved, crime case in the history of the country. And you think for every reported, documented case, how many are not documented, go unreported, are swept under the rug? And I'll tell you, it's such a multiple. It is, I mean, the number of cases and events that occur, it's exponentially, it's beyond what anyone would imagine based on what I'm observing and what I'm recording.
Right. So isn't this going to come to a head at some point?
It has
to reach critical mass.
Although we're not in control. Here's the thing. Here's the problem, Dean, and not to go off on another tangent, but anyone who thinks that they're in control, I mean, Skinwalker Ranch, we advise everyone who enters the property, regardless of their religious background or belief system, we advise them to, whether it be spiritually, to enter the ranch with a spirit of humility and reverence, because you're dealing with forces that I believe have been harmful, have potentially, I think you can say, based on, and we are at times dealing with that which can manipulate consciousness, time, and space itself. I don't think we're in control when you realize that really the rules of engagement, the social contract that we all enter into when we enter society is all subject to everyone playing by the same rules, and that there are things happening that don't abide by the same boundary conditions,
right?
By the same physics, the same, the same protocols. That's scary. No wonder people want to squash these topics. No wonder people, in many cases, want to either run the other way or ridicule these topics or anyone who has witnessed the phenomena. I mean, it stands to completely topple the very institutions, the very structures that we all buy into for our own safety, security, peace of mind. That's why we say, I mean, get ready. When I said that people may need therapy, at the conclusion of this season, after what we are going to be presenting, it's because I believe we're presenting evidence of phenomena that challenges the status quo.
I'm reminded of a quote from Jacques Vallée, who said, "It's as if to them reality is negotiable."
Yeah. You know, what gets me about this whole phenomenon thing is it is in control, which means at any moment it could totally reveal itself, right? You guys could have a skinwalker jumping across the lawn in the middle of the day and get it on 15 different cameras at the drop of a hat. At the drop of a hat, right?
Dean, I am certain of, a flying saucer, a craft of unknown origin, utilizing some type of advanced physics could appear right now if they exist. I know that for sure.
Even Stephen Greenstreet saw one, right? Stephen Greenstreet saw that boomerang. Imagine if we get a fleet of those during the day.
Yeah,
on the ranch.
I don't know what he would.
Every week.
What? Excuse me?
I was saying we got to meet with you guys every week. Like, we got so much that we're running over. Yeah. I'm sensitive to your time. I feel like we're holding you guys up. I know you've been up since 3 a.m.
No, well, I want to show maybe in one of the quotes I really that I appreciate relative to these topics, and it is I think I could share just this Zoom allow me to screen share.
Yeah, it should. Go ahead.
Let's see. Maybe not. I don't think there's a screen share function, unfortunately. Anyways,
you should have a share screen down there.
Send it to Dean. We'll include it.
Yeah, I'll add it.
Yeah.
You can send it to me and I'll add it.
It's okay. It's but quote. We will declare frankly that nothing is clear in this world. Only fools and charlatans know and understand everything. If there is anything to hopefully be derived from this conversation this evening, my hope is that people who are following our effort are seeing that we are explorers. We are trying to approach these topics with humility. We are trying to approach these topics with some discipline and responsibility. And we're willing to let the public in under the tent to be a participant in this journey. And we are, I'll tell you, it's an honor to be collaborating with people on our insider forum, to have so many that are standing vigil with Erik and keeping a careful log of events that we can analyze, that we can carefully organize, effectively separate the signal from the noise. What an incredible privilege. And we don't take that. I think we appreciate it. Crowdsourcing the answers to the nature of the phenomena is a big part of our priority with our Insider Forum, and frankly, our series with the docu-series. You'll notice we are going to continue to bring forward credentialed third-party experts and professionals to help aid the investigation. And it's because we know we need all the help we can get to understand what is at play. I will say, and maybe this is a little bit of a teaser, I think people are going to be quite surprised level of professionalism and caliber and qualifications of those that we bring into our investigation in the weeks ahead. Buckle up.
That's great to hear. Buckle up. Okay. How about you, Erik? You got any last minute words? We're recording this. This is for your future self, for the masses in the future. You never know when they're going to listen to this, right?
Well, certainly to both of you, Dean and Charles, I would say that I've enjoyed this conversation, but that's not quite it. I appreciate it. And, to your earlier question, if it would be constructive and if there's, some good to be done, derived from it, I'll be glad to join you, either accompanied with someone else or perhaps just the 3 of us. Okay. I'm open to it. So again, I've appreciated the conversation. I wasn't sure where this was going. I think we've touched on a lot of really important aspects of the investigation.
Yeah, and I want you gentlemen to know how much we appreciate to really take off from Erik's comment. We do appreciate all of the incredible support, the interest. It feels good not to be alone. It feels good to have collaboration. Did you say participants on the Reddit? 26,000
members on the forum.
Subscribers. There's more than that participating, I think. Wow. Off and on.
That's humbling. And thank you for moderating that forum and helping us. And thank you to everyone who is part of our our collective journey here. We look forward to getting to the truth. That's all I want. I just want the truth. I want to get to the bottom of what, the nature of what we are interacting with, what we are documenting, what we are experiencing. And what we are documenting and experiencing is not confined to the borders of Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
Even though we see a high frequency for whatever reason, and this is indeed a hotbed, a living laboratory, for whatever reason, for studying the phenomena, we are not so arrogant to think that this is the only place, or that we're the only ones that are privy to this. And that's why the more minds that come together, the more experiences that are shared, and frankly, the more data. And I want data more than anyone. That's the hilarity of it all. If anyone knew how much I want data and how much I want to have some definitive evidence that we can actually study and have peer reviewed, I think they'd be quite surprised. We're all in the same boat. We are such kindred spirits, all of us. At least those of us who are sincere, who don't have an agenda, who aren't trying to grind an axe or trying to channel some faith crisis into their work. We're just trying to get to the bottom of this and get some answers.
Thank you both very much for your time. Very gracious of both of you, considering how busy you are.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you well for your attention.
Thank you.
We have another, Eric. We probably have another 4 to 6 hours in this day. I'll circle up with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brandon, let's connect.
Yeah.
You guys have got to take it easy. You guys have got to slow down at some point. I'm serious. Everyone's worried about you burning out.
Hey,
Don't worry.
Yeah, we're on a mission, friends. And thank you, Dean. Thank you, Charles. We look forward to continuing this dialogue. And I will second Eric's motion and extend an invitation to both of you to visit and be briefed on what we are doing. Visit the ranch, especially given your considerable investment time.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
So invite everyone, and we have to be very, very careful for so many reasons I've discussed in public forum. We look forward to being collaborative and open. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, guys.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, or whatever Truman show you.
Bye.